Hey there, internet friends, and welcome to That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions of the thing. This show is made possible entirely by the support of our patrons over at patreon.com/thatnerdysite, so if you like the show and you can support us over there, we would definitely appreciate it, but if you can't, no big deal. The fact that you're listening is awesome, and of course, we would love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. This week, we're coming to you with a full fun squad because we are kicking off our Summer of Star Wars, where we're going to be going through all of the Skywalker Saga films in the Star Wars canon, as well as some of the additional miscellaneous ones like Solo, like Rogue One, probably like the Clone Wars, and potentially the Empire of... Is it Empire of Dreams? No, I forget.
Empire Dreams, yeah.
Empire Dreams,
the
yeah.
documentary. Cool.
Familiar.
So joining me, we have Logan Wilkinson. How you doing, Logan?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm very, very excited for this podcast journey here.
Excellent. We have Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cameron?
I find your lack of subscription disturbing.
Okay. And we have
We're
Frank
getting it
Pisani.
started early, Trevor.
How you doing, Frank?
Doing great. I'm also super excited to catch up and talk about A New Hope. It was also it still holds up.
Yeah. Frank Pisani making his triumphant return to content here on That Nerdy Site.
Finally.
Apart from you came in, you snuck in for the WandaVision episode of That D Plus show, but other than that, it has been a while since we've had you on anything, so I'm glad you were able to get this to work, and let's have some fun. Yeah, we're going to be talking today all about Star Wars A New Hope, because we are doing things in like theatrical release order. We're not going to start at Phantom Menace and then like go 1 through 9. We're going to do 4, 5, 6, then 1, 2, 3, then 7, 8, 9, and then on to what would be next? Rogue One, Solo, and Clone Wars. Maybe Clone Wars first. I don't know. Well, I have not figured out like what month 3 of this looks like yet, but yeah. So the Star Wars or the Skywalker Saga stuff, easy enough to tackle. So yeah, why did we pick it? Because the Summer of Star Wars is a fun idea. It's an idea I've had for this show for a little while, that we would kind of sit down and do a more themed like series of content, and it was a nice alliteration, which I'm always a fan of. The April month of Mighty Ducks ended up being like a weird little pilot for like a batch of themed content, and so yeah, we're gonna do some Star Wars here for the upcoming months. So yeah, a little bit of the history lesson here. Of course, the film released May 25th, 1977. Other notable releases at the time, we had Eraserhead from David Lynch that came out March 25th. We had Annie Hall from Woody Allen, came out April 20th. We had...
Gross.
Agreed. It's... Going back to 1977, though, there weren't like a dozen movies a month, so I had to really stretch out the windows here to make this more than Smokey and the Bandit, which came out 2 days later on May 27th. And
awesome film.
And then The Rescuers was one of the Disney
also
offerings
awesome
that year,
Yep.
June 24th, which
I did not realize that was from 77.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was your Rescuers? Yeah, it was from 77.
Yeah, I stand by the fact that The Rescuers was the first movie I remember seeing in a movie theater. I remember, I have like vivid memory of going and seeing it with my grandmother and the girl and the alligator and stuff like that. But then I didn't see the movie again for many, many years, and I was like, "What was this movie that I saw that that had this girl and an alligator and stuff like that?" And I'm sure it was one of those things that like Harkins Theaters is the local chain here. I'm sure they did like Saturday morning movies for kids. And like I'm sure I'm
pretty sure they re-released it.
I mean, they might have
re-released
done that
it because they would have been only like a year or two after that they put out The Rescuers 2 Down Under.
Yeah, that was
that's the one.
Well,
but, so, which by the way, talk about like the gap in sequels there.
Yeah, it's worse than Ghostbusters 1 to Ghostbusters 2.
Wait, are you guys saying Rescuers Down Under is bad?
No.
No, the gap
between
in
the
time.
two.
Oh, just the years.
77 to like 93, 94.
Is that when it came out? Rescuers down.
Came out
That
of the
feels
90s for
late.
sure.
I feel like it
'cause
was like 90.
1990.
When you look at that,
Yep.
yeah, 1990. Yeah, when you look at that, the technology, like the drawing and animation technology that they had to use to animate the bird in Rescuers Down Under, it was like a new technique and technology they were using at the time. That would end up later being used and evolved into the same thing that they used for the stampede scene in The Lion King. So,
That's cool.
yeah, miscellaneous fun facts.
Hooray! We'll have to eventually sit down and do some Rescuers that D plus shows.
I would love that.
I'm
yeah.
down.
If we include the Great Mass Detective, I'm in.
I mean, yeah. Well, I mean,
Sure.
like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not really in that canon, but I'm sure we could have some fun.
It's mice. It's mice movies. Let's go.
Yeah. Well, I'm
Some
trying
say
to
it's
now I'm trying to
the-
think if like An American Tale, was that a Fox movie? Is that now?
It was a Fox movie.
Is that on Disney Plus?
Ooh,
Because
an American.
I feel like that was
are we just gonna
a
have-
Don Bluth movie, right?
It is a Don Bluth movie. Yeah.
Was his stuff with Fox? Okay. Anyway,
His
so, yeah.
stuff was with Fox. Yeah. 20th Century Fox. Mhm.
But we're not talking about any of that stuff today. We're talking about Star Wars. So, has a runtime of, according to Disney Plus, 2 hours and 4 minutes. According to IMDb, like 2 hours 1 minute. And original runtime was shorter because, of course, we're only able to really have access to the special editions at this point. God
damn it.
And the Disney Plus version also probably has like an extra couple minutes of like all of the international credits and stuff like that are playing on there. In the Star Wars timeline of things, this of course was the one that started it all, and would be followed up in May of 1980 by The Empire Strikes Back, which we will get to next week. The roll call. This we won't have to really dive. Well, I guess some of them we'll have to dive into every time, but George Lucas, of course, going to be pretty synonymous with a lot of this stuff, despite the fact that he's really only directed a handful of things. Prior to this, of course, he had done THX 1138, which I've never seen, but I just remember THX being the sound thing that played before every movie when I was growing up. And then American Graffiti as well before this. And then after this, his only other directing credits really are the prequels. He would not return to direct.
He directed Red Wings.
No, he was a producer of Red Wings. He did not direct
Oh,
it.
he didn't direct it.
Nope.
Okay.
That was what I thought too. I was like, wait, didn't he have something that he did after the prequels? And yeah, Red Tails was what it was.
Red Tails, yeah.
And yeah, he was an executive producer on that, and that was like his big post Star Wars project. But yeah, he was not the director on it. It's kind of like that, like Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas. Everybody thinks Tim Burton directed it. Tim Burton did not direct Nightmare Before Christmas.
Nope.
So. He was also the writer for this one, having previously written the aforementioned THX 1138 and American Graffiti. He would go on to provide the story for Empire Strikes Back, the story for Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark, Return of the Jedi, the screenplay and story for Return of the Jedi, the story for Temple of Doom, the screenplay for Captain EO, which I feel like that's one of those things I did know, but I always forget. Captain EO, of course, was the Michael Jackson 3D movie that plays at Disneyland, or played at Disneyland for many, many years. He did the story for Willow, the story for Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and then he would come back and basically, in addition to directing the prequels, he wrote Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith, and provided the story for Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. So, yeah.
Really wish he hadn't.
Well, there's also the upcoming, untitled 5th Indiana Jones, which he's not on IMDb as like story by yet. So we'll see what his involvement is on that one eventually. Of course, we have starring Mark Hamill playing Luke Skywalker, who prior to this had did not have too much in his credit repertoire, but he did have a voice acting thing in a movie called Wizards, which is a very weird, like metal ass animated film from like 1975 or something.
It's such a kick-ass film.
I remember watching that. A friend of mine back years and years ago when I worked at Sam's Club, one of my friends that worked with me at the memberships desk was like, "This is one of my favorite movies of all time. You have to watch this." And I watched it and I was just like, I don't know what the hell this is, but I don't think I like it. No, it's not. It was not for me.
It's so rad as hell.
Yeah.
Like that film goes into like, it's funny too, because originally it was going to be called Wiz War. But because Star Wars was also being produced by Fox, They made the guy change the name of it
Yeah.
and called it The Wizard, because the Wizard, of course, is the main character. It's a rad film. It's super cool. Who does he play in?
I don't
Playing,
remember. He's one of the one of the voice cast in it.
It's a rad film, man.
He has been playing the Joker on and off since 1992 in Batman animated and video game stuff. He, of course, was in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. For our Kingdom Hearts fans, he has been in Kingdom Hearts since, I believe, Birth by Sleep as Master Eraqus. Most recently, you could have heard him in Invincible playing Art Rosenbaum, the tailor. And he is in the recently announced Masters of the Universe Revelation series, I believe coming to Netflix. He's going to be playing Skeletor in that.
Makes sense.
Very lauded career. He's also done, fun other things like, he played the Trickster in both TV series of The Flash and stuff. Very long, lauded career. Harrison Ford, of course, playing Han Solo, the biggest star of the film, arguably. He had been in American Graffiti prior to this, so he'd worked with George Lucas on that. Then he, of course, would go on to be Indiana Jones in Blade Runner. He was Jack Ryan in Patriot Games and Clear and Present Danger. He most recently, you've probably seen him or heard him. Maybe you probably have not, but most recently he has been in The Secret Life of Pets 2 and The Call of the Wild, and as mentioned earlier, will be in the upcoming Untitled Indiana Jones film, fifth film. Carrie Fisher, of course, playing Princess Leia Organa. Prior to this, had been in Shampoo. She would go on to be in stuff like The Blues Brothers, When Harry Met Sally. She has an uncredited role as the psychiatrist in Austin Powers' International Man of Mystery. She also was in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. She did many a voice in Family Guy for a while, and she was a very hard to find character in Dishonored, which is a nod I always love giving some love to her on that one. Because basically, you have to kill some character, and then she will be the character that takes over if you killed that character or something like that.
Yeah.
She's basically a disembodied voice in the game. She's also a known, long, well beloved kind of punching up scripts and stuff like that. But I do not have the list of her credits on that side. Peter Cushing.
That, and she did if anybody wants to watch it, she does a one-woman show. I think it's on HBO.
Yeah.
That's just absolutely phenomenal.
It's incredible. Yeah.
Peter Cushing playing Grand Moff Tarkin. Prior, he had basically film work dating back to 1939, including iconic characters like Victor Frankenstein, Van Helsing, Sherlock Holmes, and Doctor Who in Doctor Who and the Daleks, the non-official Doctor of Doctor Who.
The non-canon Doctor, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. Alec Guinness playing Ben Obi-Wan Kenobi. Had been Fagin in Oliver Twist. He was in The Bridge on the River Kwai, which I believe he won the Academy Award for. He was also in Lawrence of Arabia and Dr. Zhivago. So he was basically bringing the gravitas to this film, of course. Anthony Daniels as C-3PO. I just was amused by this because I looked as I was going through his IMDb. I was like, I don't know really any of his non-Star Wars stuff. But he has 84 IMDb acting credits, and I counted 52 of them are for C-3PO.
Yeah, for sure.
62% of his acting credits are for C-3PO, but he was also in the Lord of the Rings animated version back in the 70s or early 80s as Legolas.
That's cool.
Kenny Baker, of course, playing R2-D2, and Peter Mayhew playing Chewbacca. Didn't do too much outside of those respective roles, but they are, of course, iconic in them. David Prowse playing the body for Darth Vader, who was in Casino Royale. Pulled that in just for you, Logan. He was also in A Clockwork Orange, and he has portrayed Frankenstein's monster in many form over the years. And then, of course, James Earl Jones, the iconic Darth Vader voice. Prior to this, had done Doctor Strangelove, and then would go on to do roles in Coming to America, Field of Dreams, He also joined the Jack Ryan universe in The Hunt for Red October, Patriot Games, and Clear and Present Danger. So he bridged the gap between your Baldwin years and your Harrison Ford years. He, of course, was also in The Sandlot, as well as Mufasa in both versions of The Lion King, the animated and the animated version. And most recently, because it is animated, and anybody that says it's live action is incorrect and doesn't know what live action is. And most recently, he was in Coming to America with the number 2 for Amazon Prime.
And he
I will also
continues to
give
voice
James
those
Earl
Arby's
Jones-
commercials to this day.
There you go. Yeah. What was that, Logan?
He also gets a shout out for his portrayal in Fences as well on Broadway,
yes.
which is very, very excellent.
Indeed.
There's also his portrayal in Cry of My Beloved Country.
He's done many a wonderful
Yeah.
thing. You mentioning Fences on Broadway. He was in when I went to New York after my sister graduated high school. I think so. I bring out this picture every now and then of me and my sister with in a picture of Alan Tudyk, who we saw in Spamalot, and I'm pretty sure in that picture behind us is James Earl Jones in the poster for On Golden Pond, which was on Broadway at that same time. And so it's like if I did if Facebook tried to auto caption that, I think they would pull in James Earl Jones in that picture, because I just remember that being like very vibrant for that time in my life. Diving into some of the trivia. This was by far the highest domestic gross of 1977 by nearly $300 million. Thank you, Logan, for catching that before we started recording, where I had originally written $300,000. It brought in nearly $461 million versus Close Encounters of the Third Kind's $169 million. So, yeah, about $290 million difference there. Logan also mentioned it was pretty much the number 1 highest grossing movie of all time there in 1977. However, it had more of a meager beginning because it opened in just 32 theaters on May 25th, 1977. But by weekend's end, because it was Memorial Day weekend, it had expanded to a whopping 43 theaters over that holiday weekend. But yeah,
Massive.
of course, it was a very different time. The movie ran basically for a year plus in theaters, and people just kept showing up to go see it. George Lucas was so sure this movie would flop that instead of attending the premiere, he went on vacation to Hawaii with his good friend Steven Spielberg, where they came up with the idea for Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, which they produced, of course, after Star Wars became a success. George Lucas's decision to accept a lower salary on the movie in exchange for full merchandising rights, famously, was considered a fool's gamble on his part. Toys based on movies had never been major money earners, though some movie toy combinations had done moderate retail returns. Because of the long gap between when a movie would go through its theatrical run and when any products based on it would be available. This movie, however, was such a phenomenon that it reached holiday 1977 sales period in full swing and changed the way movies were merchandised forever. Of course, I remember the Kenner line back when the prequels came out and just going out and buying every figure I could opening night and all that stuff, and looking at the back to see if it was a first edition or whatever. I remember doing all sorts of that kind of stuff. In early drafts,
I got Darth Maul and Qui-Gon Jinn, and that's all I cared about.
There you go. It was the kind of thing.
Mission accomplished.
Because of course, by that point in time, it was well known that the people who had in the box, Star Wars toys from 1977 and 1978, those things were worth bank. So my family, we would buy 2, versions of the toys, one for me and my sister to play with, and one that we kept in the box. And I'm sure there are a ton that are still in the box in my parents' house somewhere. That I should probably go back and check out. In early drafts of the script, R2-D2 could speak standard English, and he had a rather foul vocabulary. Although all of R2-D2's English speech was removed, many of C-3PO's reactions to it were left in. At the 1978 Academy Awards, Star Wars took home 6 Oscars for Best Art Direction, Best Costume Design, Best Sound, Best Film Editing, Best Visual Effects, and Best Original Score. James Earl Jones was picked to voice Vader due to his deep, mellifluous voice and was paid a total of $7,500 for his 2-hour vocal work on that first movie. Alec Guinness.
That's wild.
Yeah. On the flip side, Alec Guinness negotiated the best deal of all the main cast characters, receiving 2.25% of the profits of the movie, which came to $3.3 million back then. Estimates have him making over $60 million over the years from that deal. So basically, like pulling an RDJ, who famously took a lot of points on the back end of Iron Man. USC grad Ben Burt revolutionized the use of sound effects in cinema and was given a Special Achievement Academy Award for his work on Star Wars. Some notable sound effects include Chewbacca's growl is a blend of a bear, lion, walrus, and badger vocalizations. R2-D2's voice was created using synthesizer loops matched with beeps, tweets, and boops patterned after infant coos performed by Burt himself. Darth Vader's sinister breathing was recorded by sticking a microphone inside a scuba tank regulator. The Tusken Raider yowl is a cocktail of mule sounds and people imitating mule sounds. The famous lightsaber buzzing whoosh was made by blending the hum of a 35mm film projector and passing a broken microphone cable by the tubes of an old TV set. The sound of
so wild.
Yeah. The sound of a screeching TIE fighter engine was created by combining an elephant's bellow and an auto driving on rainy pavement. And lastly, the sound of the blaster fire was created by hitting the guy wire of an AM radio transmitter tower with a hammer. So Ben
That's my
Burt
favorite one.
out there
Mind-boggling.
Just-
Absolutely mind-boggling.
just creating all these iconic sounds out of the weirdest little mishmashes of things that nowadays, like any kid under the age of 50 will just go and imitate. I remember with Guardians of the Galaxy, I believe they said like Chris Pratt basically had to he was more than once scolded for making pew pew noises when he was shooting in scenes and stuff like that. They were like, dude, like we're gonna do that for you. So James Gunn would basically like say, stop it, Chris. So yeah.
I had heard that about Star Wars too, where sometimes they have to stop the actors because they're doing the whooshing sounds in the lightsaber scenes, and it's the same thing where they're like, "Stop! We put that in post."
Yeah. We don't need your help for that, guys. We got it. We've been around the block on this one. Yeah. But it would be so hard to fight against that. Like, I think of like the times, especially like because I took like stage combat classes in college and stuff, and just the times when I'd be swinging around a rapier and just pretending it's a lightsaber, just going vroom, 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 just having a good old time with it. It would be very.
I mean, how many times have you reenacted Luke's classic, like from the in the beginning of the film?
Oh yeah,
like just with just anything,
yeah,
anything long and thin.
Yeah. Realizing
just
that the audio listeners have no idea what you did.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I did the
Luke swinging the lightsaber from early on in the film.
Which, thinking back on it, like when you look forward about what kind of damage lightsabers do, horribly dangerous.
Oh yeah. That's the what is it? There's that meme that makes its rounds. That's basically like Luke holding the lightsaber, pointing at his face or whatever, and then like somebody turns it on and just goes shooting through his eye or something. And Obi-Wan just kind of doesn't care or doesn't react or whatever. Yeah, would have been crazy. Could have done some serious damage. So yeah, I guess before we dive into like, does it hold up and what do we think? Let's go around the table with like what everybody's Star Wars history is. Like, do you have like fond memories or like significant memories of when you first watched Star Wars or when you got first introduced to Star Wars? Logan, I will throw it to you first.
Yeah. I mean, I have very strong, vivid memories of Star Wars, right? It's one of my earliest, like, not even film memories, just memories in general, are watching these movies, right, and knowing these characters. Right, like, I always talk about how James Bond and Star Wars are kind of my two cinematic loves. And so Star Wars has kind of always been there. It's always been a presence in my life. Phantom Menace came out when I was 7 years old, so I was like perfectly primed for that. I'd already seen the original trilogy a half dozen times by then. And so, yeah, I mean, I think I've seen all these movies, a dozen times. Two of them are among like my 10 favorite movies of all time. One of the Star Wars films that we'll get to is one of like my 3 or 4 favorite movies ever. Yes, I mean, I have a very kind of deep, abiding love for the series and all of its quirks and all of its kind of eccentric natures and flaws and goofiness. I embrace it all.
All right, Cameron, how about you? What's your history?
So I was about 4 years old when I walked up the stairs to see my brother watching this thing.
Cameron's soliloquy about to go on.
Yeah, where it was the fight between Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker at the end of Return of the Jedi. And immediately was captivated by it. Watched it like last, eighth of the film. And like, so was totally spoiled on like the big surprise and everything. I've never gotten that moment of the reveal naturally, because I just had it spoiled from the moment I watched it. And I was immediately captivated by this idea of he had to fight his dad, and his dad was evil, but like he's good, and they have like laser swords. Like, what's going on? And immediately I was like just pestering my brother because he was the one watching it, and he said, "Well, it's the third one." I was like, "There's more?" He goes, "Yeah, you don't even know like how it started." And I was like, where is it? Like, and my brother just produced it. We had the trilogy on VHS tape, the classic. Came in like the box with like the different faces on each side of it. Stormtrooper for New Hope, Vader for Empire Strikes Back, and Yoda for Return of the Jedi. Actually, Vader and Stormtrooper might be flipped now that I think about it. I digress. But yeah, I just watched it and immediately binged through these films. I was 4, so I wasn't able to like read subtitles yet. So my favorite thing to do was to like get my dad or somebody else to watch it with me, Return of the Jedi especially, and read me the subtitles. And so like that was one of my favorite things to do, was just like have the subtitles read to me, watching these films. And I used to watch A New Hope every Sunday. I watched A New Hope every Sunday for about, I want to say 4 to 6 years. Just about every Sunday. And if it was at like my aunt's house, it was like, I had like, it got to the point that when I stayed over at my aunt's house, I had a copy of A New Hope there just for that Sunday if I was there. Because I loved it. A New Hope, I think, is extraordinarily special to me as far as like films go. But when it comes to Star Wars as a whole, like my obsession with Star Wars lasted for years. I've been through the films. I was 10 when A Phantom Menace came out, which already being a super weird kid and into politics, I was like super into like I'm like, well, there's a galactic Senate. They're actually going to show us the Senate, and there's politics and a trade embargo. There's a trade embargo. Like the way wars actually start in real life, they're doing it in that. I'm like, this is great. This is the best thing ever. Qui-Gon Jinn, Liam Neeson, my first introduction to that man. Like, Ewan McGregor, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Darth Maul showing up, Duel of the Fates. Like the whole thing was just like this spectacle as a kid, and immediately just like falling super into the my rabbit hole into the expanded universe was actually the prequel expanded universe that they put out after Phantom Menace. And so like diving through the Obi-Wan Qui-Gon books and like just embracing completely the Star Wars fandom to the point where like at one point in time I could tell you every single lightsaber form, including their variants, who practiced them. Like I was such a super nerd for Star Wars, and as I got older, it's tapered off. Still a massive fan, but like I'm not consuming every piece of Star Wars media that I can.
Okay, Frank, hit me with your origin story.
Yeah, no, I've been a Star Wars fan for a long time too, going all the way back to when I was a kid. I was trying to think earlier because I was like, what was the kind of the first time I had ever seen Star Wars, or especially the first time I was kind of like introduced to it? Because like no one in my family is super nerdy, and especially I know most of them have not seen like any Star Wars, like especially even the originals. And like my parents were like teenagers when these came out, so they were like in the prime audience to like go to the movies and experience these, and they just never saw them. So I had no one who was like, I'm going to introduce this to you. It was just culturally just like so around. And even kind of the same thing as Cam, like I never got to have that moment of like, oh, Darth Vader is his father and you find out. Like I just knew that going in, but I don't even remember how I knew that. It was just everybody knew, you know? It was just one of those things. But I definitely remember going to see Revenge of the Sith in the theaters, and I think that might have been the first one I ever saw, which is just really funny to just dive in like right at that weird point. I may have seen some of the other ones before that, but that's the first one I definitely remember going to see. But I knew, I was like, oh, it's Star Wars, and even at the end when he turns into Darth Vader, I'm like, yeah, it's Darth Vader. Like I don't know, like you just know, at least I did, like just from it being around. But then in terms of the original trilogy, kind of I think I had seen all the prequels first, and then I eventually wanted to go back and check out the original trilogy, and I caught it on cable. That was literally for the entire time I was growing up for so long. I kind of like Cam was, it wasn't every Sunday, but it was every time they would do those huge marathon weekends of like, we're going to play all the Star Wars movies with commercials, so it takes all day. That was just my thing. Like I would just sit down and watch the original trilogy.
Wait, Frank, you watched the prequels first?
I'm pretty sure I did, yeah. I'm pretty sure.
Holy
but it's because,
shit.
like, again, I mean, there was no one, like, here, watch these movies, and we didn't own them. Like, so I watched the original trilogy on cable, and I watched the prequels. I'm pretty sure. I know I saw Revenge of the Sith in theaters. I might have saw the other ones in theaters, too. And then I saw those at some point. So I'm pretty sure I had seen more of the prequels, or not most of the prequels, and then I saw the original trilogy, which, I mean, I knew it was better, like, when I saw it the first time. I can say that.
Oh my gosh, what was that like? What was that like seeing the original trilogy for the first time after the prequels and just, like, seeing, like, even though they were older, they were that much better? What was that like?
I mean, I definitely was like, I thought it was better, and I enjoyed so much more about it and so much more about the characters, but it was kind of weird just trying to fit all the pieces of the prequel like into that was my thing, like because they're talking about, and I'm like, oh yeah, they're talking about, like when they talk about Darth Vader, I'm like, yeah, Anakin and whatever, like yeah, that's all I've ever known. I'm sorry, I wish I could have had it the other way. No one was there.
I think you are a fascinating person because you experienced it the same way that a lot of people are introducing their children to it,
which is just weird.
Which is a weird thing to do, but they're doing it, and it's like it's.
I don't know if that's true. I feel like that's a small minority of people who do it 1 through 6 or now 1
people
through 9.
do it.
Like, it's
in
not like
different
it's
ways.
a giant.
Like that's the thing about Star Wars. Like when you're showing it to the next generation of kids, it's freeform. Do what you want. I'm not over here saying, well, you need to show it in this order, the way we're doing it for the podcast. Like the D Plus show,
I would recommend the way we're doing it in the podcast.
I would as well, but like
clear.
I'm not gonna. If you watched it like Frank did, 1 through like 3, or starting with 3 and then 1 and 2, and then 4, 5, and 6, more power to you, man. Like Star Wars is one of these things that there's way too much gatekeeping on, and we just gotta as somebody who's like it's weird. I've never gatekeeped on Star Wars so much as I would nerd out way too quickly on Star Wars and. Scare people away from Star Wars is what I do.
I was gonna say, what? No.
Yeah, I know. Imagine the infinite tomes of lore that Star Wars has, and like I didn't get into that.
Yeah. So as the old fogey of the group, it's weird because I might have, like, in terms of like how old I was when I get introduced to Star Wars, I might have been older than all of you when you guys were introduced, because my story has a lot of very specific Arizona references to it, but I was introduced via my best friend Vinny growing up. My friend Vinny, I can't pinpoint
Shout out to Vinny.
when, but I remember growing up, Vinny lived in Apache Junction, and then at some point, I want to say when I was like 9 or 10, he moved to Mesa. And we didn't watch it until the Mesa years. Like I remember very distinctly going over to his house for a sleepover. And
did your family used to live in AJ?
No, my family lived in Scottsdale my entire life.
How does
My
Vinny, who lives in AJ, your best friend growing up?
Our parents worked for Motorola together.
Oh, that's right.
And,
Okay.
and basically, he was
All
like
right.
a year older than me, so like we were friends from like they my parents would hang out with his parents, and we were just like best friends. But we would only see each other like when we would see each other, it was a special occasion, and it was almost never for like just, hey, we're gonna go hang out. It was always like, I'm gonna go there and spend the weekend, or he was gonna come and spend the weekend with me or something like that. So it was like long, sleepover weekends with him. And for one of them, he introduced me. He had watched Star Wars, and he introduced me to Star Wars. And I remember we did this thing where like he basically like told me to pick a character, and we were just gonna like kind of pretend that those characters were us or whatever. And he immediately picked R2D2 at the beginning. I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'll go with C-3PO then. And I've regretted that ever since. Yeah,
Vinny's the man. Vinny is the man.
it's definitely one of those things. Like, I don't think I had been spoiled to like the reveals or anything like that, but it's also entirely likely that like Tommy Boy may have already been out at this time, which iconically has Chris Farley saying,
100% was.
saying "Luke, I am your father," which is why I think so many people misquote the movie, is because they're thinking of Tommy Boy and not Star Wars.
That might also be how I know that.
Exactly,
Because I know definitively I would have seen Tommy Boy before I ever saw Star Wars.
Yeah. So
That's a weird thing to say.
So yeah, Tommy
Yeah,
Boy was 95.
that's my family.
And I definitely know I saw it before 97 because I remember going to see the re-releases in theaters in 1997 when the special editions got re-released in like the lead up to the prequels. Because I remember another very Arizona reference, the Cine Capri. It was like the biggest theater in town by Harkins, and it was out in Phoenix basically, and we went and saw it at the Cine Capri, because it was basically like that was just a single theater was what the Cine Capri was at the time. Now they've like basically added them to like every Harkins that they can as just a giant theater that does a whole like the curtain opens and closes before the show or whatever. And it's just they do a little showcase thing of it, but it's historically like the biggest theater in Arizona that's not an IMAX theater. And so I remember distinctly seeing the re-releases in theaters, and that being like a cool experience. And so at that point I had known them, and so I got excited about like, oh, the new things that had changed, because I would have been 12 at the time, 14 when Phantom Menace came out. And I remember didn't see Phantom Menace like opening day, but it was I think opening weekend, and I remember hanging out in line with my friends in Fashion Square Mall for like probably 3 or 4 hours in line to see the movie. And I remember like they basically had the line go up the elevators and around, and you had to just like you basically just had to stay there and stand in line and stuff like that. And I remember we brought like our plastic lightsabers, and when we were when we finally got into the theater, like before the trailers and everything starts playing, we were just having like lightsaber duels up and down the aisles and stuff like that, and going nuts. Everybody excited for a great time. Mm-hmm. And I probably like walked out of that movie and thought it was a great time and had a great time with it. I don't think like I became jaded and cynical about it until older and wiser and stuff like that. But I was 14, so it definitely didn't like. Duel of the Fates was the coolest thing, and pod racing was
still the
was
coolest
kind of
thing.
cool. Pod racing made better by the games and stuff that came out after. But yeah, it still didn't really hold a candle to the original trilogy, which I had watched many many times in that brief span of a few years there. So that was my kind of like history and legacy with Star Wars. Is I came to it on the later side of like childhood kind of thing. But that I came into it at a great time because I came into it when it was like resurging in popularity and when we were getting the new versions and all the like the little tweaks and changes that they were adding, and then a whole new trilogy of movies and stuff. I remember like wanting to figure out how to be basically Hayden Christensen, like how Jake Lloyd has come and played Anakin. And for the second movie, they're gonna go older. How can I be an older Anakin or something like that? Because I did do theater or liked acting and stuff like that at the time. So, like I remember like distinctly thinking like maybe I could should I do the rat tail like Padawan kind of like ponytail kind of thing, and just glad I didn't. But like those were definitely thoughts that went through my head during that era.
You don't want those pictures around, yeah.
So yeah, that's my history with the series, and I've been a fan of it very much ever since. But I definitely like, as I get older with it and kind of start looking at it with a more critical eye, I definitely have like, I like about half of Star Wars, and then there's about half of Star Wars that I'm like, I don't ever need to watch that one. I'm fine.
Yeah.
So it'll be a fun summer diving into some of those. All right. So then let's dive into rewatching it now. How does it hold up, everybody? I'll kick this one off because this was a chance for me to bust out my my 4K Blu-ray version of the DVDs.
Hell yeah.
Even though I think like if you have a 4K TV and watch it on Disney Plus, I think it just upreses to basically that version. But I'm a damn collector, damn it. So I watched
the Blu-ray. Technically looks better because you're not streaming it, so you got that at least.
There we go. Yeah, and it did look great. The thing that really jumps out at me is like even with that tech is just how wonderfully tangible this movie is. Mm-hmm. So much so that like when we do get like the special editions and stuff like that get added, it's like, oh, this feels really out of place. Let's go back to
it's just ugly
to the models and the like all the just the physical and practical stuff. And just the
Brontosaurus and Mos Eisley pops out to me right away.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So yeah, like those, like that was the first thing that really like jumps out at me is like just how good it still looks because of its physicality. Like I'm sure when we get to some of these other ones, we'll dive in and be like, okay, yeah, these don't look great because the CG doesn't hold up as well. 20 years
looking
later.
at you, Attack of the Clones.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm dreading that stuff a little bit because like like when it is all just like in computers, it doesn't have as great a feel to it as I think this first one does as well. I mean, like the sound of course is phenomenal in this one. Although I will say one of the things that like really jumped out at me in this watch was because I didn't turn subtitles on. I still know every line of the movie, but I definitely couldn't hear a lot of the lines of the movie. And I think that's because like my years as a drummer are catching up with me and my ears just aren't able to distinguish as well between like dialogue and the background noise. So there were a lot of like little lines and stuff where I was like, okay, well I know what they said, but I definitely didn't hear what they said because I was hearing everything else that was going on in the scene. So that's like, that was definitely something that jumped out at me as like, oh God, I am getting old, everybody. No.
I don't even think it's that as much as like whenever you watch like Empire Dreams and like it spends a lot of time on A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, like you'll see like it was just such a scattershot, like by the skin of their teeth, like production, and like shoot the entire time through. So I wouldn't be shocked if like a lot of them were just not captured great when they were like filming everything even.
Yeah, because like even then they didn't really do ADR back then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I was.
Yeah. So and like Logan said, especially Empire, considering that he self-funded it. So, that's totally understandable though, Trevor. Although I do like, as funny as it is to like make fun of it, I don't think that's necessarily just on you.
Okay, it's definitely. It jumped out at me is because I'm like, well, I clearly know these lines, so I clearly heard them at some point, growing up in those many watches and stuff like that. So, and it's something I've just noticed in general in recent years, and that's why I play a lot of games with subtitles on, or watch a lot of movies and TV with subtitles and stuff. Is just because I'm having a harder and harder time to distinguish between dialogue and background noise, and so like. Playing through Mass Effect recently, I basically like turned all of the sound effects and ambient noise things down to like 80% and kept dialogue at 100 or something like that, so I could, stay like try and balance it like that. And I found myself watching this, wishing that I could control like the sound levels at that degree, but alas, nope. I just got to deal with my old ears, my poor
well, you were also
poor drumline years.
Oh yeah. I was gonna say you were watching it in such high definition that even if the audio got softer on those lines, while it may have come across on like a lower definition more broadly, at that higher definition you're going to get all the other sounds peaking over it. Mm-hmm. So that might have also had an effect on it as well.
True. So Cam, how do you think it holds up?
It makes me long for the original VHS tape that I had growing up, because it's missing all of the extra bullshit that George Lucas put in for the special edition.
This was definitely my first time actually hearing McClunky in context, and I was like, God, that's weird.
Yeah, mostly just the bad CG, like the Stegosaurus, or no, the Brontosaurus creature in Mos Eisley, how bad Jabba looks in the hangar.
Yeah, when Han walks over him.
Yeah, God.
Walks over him, and that entire like situation, like the retouches and re-edits that he did, it's his vision. That's fine. But I will say it still holds up, like story-wise, as it is a near perfect film, in my opinion. The way that it is, and that's why I think like the original untouched version is so much better, because that is as close to a perfect film as you can, like up there as you can get, in my opinion, because it's not trying to tell you a new story. Exactly. It's telling you a story that we all know and are familiar with in a new setting with new characters, and it's doing it in such an incredible way. He did such a great job of adapting a hero, like the philosophies of A Hero with a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell, as well as a lot of other things that we now know and consider tropes, cliches, whatever you want to call them. They are established by between him, Spielberg, Kubrick, this golden era of Hollywood directors and like artiste directors who were able to make big hits. It's absolutely fascinating. I love George Lucas's American Graffiti. I feel like his direction on Star Wars, while straightforward, just serve by keeping the New Hope so simple, it is digestible and on repeat. You can repeatedly digest this film over and over again, and I swear every time I watch this movie, I get something different out of it, or I notice other things about it that I don't normally focus on. In particular, I was watching it, and I found myself so much more drawn towards not just the sound effects, but just the overall ambient of the film, like the way that they captured these long empty corridors in the Death Star, the way that the farm felt like tight knit and like cramped in certain ways, the way that they just use music and sound effects, but also just like that ambient effect of these very critical moments where it's like it's totally silent when they reach Alderaan and they're like, oh, where am I? Like, oh, we're like somehow like they're in the ruins of Alderaan, and then eventually it's just this moment of silence as they're like, as the only sounds you're hearing are Han and Luke bickering about where's Alderaan, and not realizing Alderaan's all around them, and then the Death Star, those momentous of like the music cues for the Death Star appearing and tractor beaming them. That's no moon. There's such familiar, iconic moments that he captures so well here in this film that it's very clear that this is a passion project that he did because he couldn't get Flash Gordon.
Yeah.
He wanted to do a Flash Gordon film, but he couldn't get the rights for it, so he said, "Fine, I'll do it myself." And he had several drafts, the story of how he put together Star Wars, and before he had a much more complicated thing about it. But I think the biggest one also that I took away from it this time is something that I've also taken away from it in prior viewings. Is I'm reminded of the inspiration he had of keeping the droids as the central characters, where everything usually in A New Hope, everything happens around the droids. They're not your main characters, but they're the central characters that are the viewpoints of everything. And he got that from Akira Kurosawa's The Hidden Fortress, where the central characters are these peasant characters. And the way that, like, there's so much thought and care and just meticulous, like, the things that he's known for being meticulous, like, just nitpicky about just everything. But the way that he is in particularly just so nitpicky about this film, and the way that it comes out just makes it like the blueprint for a hero's journey stories going forward. And it's done so well and captured so well and performed so well. Like, it's just, to me, it's just such a perfect film.
Great.
So.
Frank, how about you? What do you think in terms of how it holds up?
I agree with a lot of what Cam said, and because I do think it honestly is kind of I think it's a great movie, and I think this, especially in terms of the larger kind of Star Wars canon, especially as we've seen all these movies now, this is one of the better just like A to B movies, just by itself, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and obviously this is where it all started and kind of where everything sprung out from. But there's so much of the later films that can even get lost in not having like a good A to B, or they're thinking too much about some other things. But I think this is just like, it's such a good just like movie, and having like the A to B story of, and while still setting things up that they can, you know, come back and play with later. But like, I think that was something that I noticed this time that I was really kind of still surprised by and still enjoyed. And then one thing I noticed this time is I've seen the whole original trilogy, all three of these original movies multiple times, but this was one of those times rewatching it where I had like all those, kind of like Cam said earlier, like I would see these scenes, or we would get there and like I knew it was kind of coming up, and I'd get excited like, oh, he's about to say this, or oh, this is about to happen, or like same. And then even when the lines would happen, like when he, exactly like the other thing that Cam said where he's like, well, that's no moon. Like, that line got me. Like, I'm just at home, and I've seen this movie like 10 times or whatever. But when he's like, that's no moon, and I'm just like, oh. And then when he's like, even when they're doing the Alderaan thing, and he's like, they're just trying to get Leia to tell him, and she's like, yeah, the base is on Tatooine. And then he's like, okay, all right, we'll blow it up. And then she's
Dantooine,
like,
but yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're good.
No, it's a good correction.
Like,
but I mean, like, it's not necessary. That was me being a super nerd. Sorry.
I just liked it though, because it's like, I like that like she gives them up, and then but then they're still like, all right, we'll just go ahead and blow it up, and then like she like that whole scene still just hits so hard, and like I've seen it 5 times, and I'm still like, God, they're just gonna blow up the whole planet, like, and then they just do, and I'm like, I don't know, like, it just, there's so many great moments, and I was like, it's just so nice that even no matter how many times you watch it, I'm still just excited to like relive some of those moments.
Yeah. Before I throw it. Go ahead.
Before that, I just let you know, she actually doesn't give up the rebellion.
No.
Because the base is on Yavin 4. Dantooine is a small enclave. They make reference to it in a miniature, like, small snippet line.
Yeah.
Later in the film.
They basically say there wasn't anybody. Like, there was, like, they checked Dantooine and there was nothing there.
Mm.
Yeah.
So you lied, and it's like, well, you blew up Alderaan anyway, so screw you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like everyone lied here.
Yeah.
That's why I love Leia. She's such a good character.
Yeah, she's so great.
One of the things, kind of bouncing off what you talked about there, Frank, that I think does stand out about this movie, especially in the context of the grander series, is this is the only one that stands on its own without it's not trying to set up another movie. Yes, they of course eventually would, but like, it tells a complete movie start to finish. And much like, you know, pulpy serials of the time, yeah, they let Vader kind of like continue to fly off, but like, you know, if we'd never gotten an Empire Strikes Back, Star Wars still would have been like a cool big story that would have had a lot of, you know, excitement behind it, because it is just telling, you know, it is the hero's journey story of Luke, and he overcomes and blows up the bad guys at the end, and everybody celebrates and wins, and and we don't get that anywhere else in the saga. Everything, like, even like Empire ends with a clear like setup for where the next movie is going to go, and then obviously the prequels are all feeding into where we will go in the original trilogy, and then of course the sequel trilogy is all pulling from and referencing other things in the saga over the years. So like, this is the one that could be a standalone movie, and if you never watched another Star Wars, you'd still have a good time with this one and not feel like anything was like left on the cutting room floor or missing or anything like that. So Logan, let us throw it over to you. How do you think it holds up?
Yeah, I mean, I think that A New Hope is great, right? I think that as we will get going and as we kind of do our ranking of the Star Wars movies throughout the show, I think it's clearly such a special film, both because of the fact that it is the genesis of this entire massive franchise and saga and really mythology. This kind of a modern like storytelling mythology here, but also because it's just like Cameron, like Frank, and like you have already said, it does everything so well. I think that the characters of Luke, Han, Leia are such a well-realized and fleshed out trio to kind of be at the heart of the film. I think Vader is such a great, like obviously iconic villain who is just so easy to just be like, that guy is evil. I can just see and hear him. He's all black. Got it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, going back to like the black hats in like old Western films, like everything is so simplified, but not in a way that I think diminishes it, but in a way that just keeps it to where like you can just constantly keep moving along, right? Like A New Hope is probably my least favorite of the original trilogy movies, but that's also like saying something is your like least favorite like ice cream flavor. Like they're all great, they're all like wonderful in the original trilogy. And I think what it does in terms of setting up both the two films to come and then the larger series is so like remarkable. It's such an incredible achievement. Like there have been a lot of movies in the history of cinema, and there's not really anything that's ever matched what Star Wars did in like the summer of '77, right? Or the ensuing, almost 45 years since then. And yeah, I mean, there's so many tiny small moments that I love in the film, right? And like this kind of bridges into like what are your favorite moments, right? But this movie has one of my top 3 or 4 favorite scenes in all of the films, which is Luke looking at the twin suns. I think it is like a perfect scene. I've wrote about it for one of my like film classes back in college. Like I think you have the entire essence of who that character is and like the entire spirit of what Star Wars should be like distilled into that moment, to those shots. And I think despite the issues and the flaws with Star Wars at large, and then A New Hope, which has less of the flaws, that spirit, I think, of like Luke just like wanting this adventure, right, and wanting this potential, right, and wanting like step right on the edge of like a cliff, and like looking like one last glance back at like his life that will never be the same again, and the future that he's about to kind of live in. I think is such a beautiful moment, right? And obviously Luke is my favorite character in the series. I think this is a very Luke-focused movie for pretty obvious reasons. And so, yeah, I think the movie just has such fun with it, right? Like, I think for me, one of the things that I think the sequel trilogy and the prequel trilogy, as we'll kind of watch as we go on, misses out on is the sense of humor, right? And almost like this sense of fun that I think pervades the original trilogy and in particular A New Hope, right? Like it is a kind of swashbuckling adventure, right? It is a like B-movie serial story. And I think you very much feel the love that George Lucas had for those kind of stories and those kind of films growing up. And there's just, it is a utterly charming film, that out of the original trilogy, even while saying it is my, like, you know, again, like using air quotes, like least favorite of the original trilogy, it is probably the one that I could just like play and watch every day and never be bothered by, because it is just such a like chill adventure throughout.
Yeah, one of the things that really jumped out at me was how much I just enjoy the humor of like the film rewatching it. You know, like again, knowing all these lines as well as we do and everything, but like still, like scenes like R2-D2 and Chewbacca playing the space chess thing, which I'm sure Cameron knows the actual name of it or whatever, but like the "Let the Wookiee win" line, like new strategy, "Let the Wookiee win," is just like one of the funniest lines in this movie. Yeah, because it is incredibly analytical response from what we have seen of that character so far, and we know everything we need to know about like all of those characters in that moment, in response to that moment. The Han swagger that is in there throughout. I often kind of and especially when we get to something like Solo, I like my hottest take in Star Wars is that I think Alden Ehrenreich plays more different layers of Han Solo than we ever see Harrison Ford do over the run of the series, because but the note that Harrison Ford is playing, of course, is he is playing it pitch perfect, but we don't see him doubt all that much, and probably the most we do see is in little moments here, where he might be questioning whether or not he makes the right call, or the scene of him chasing down the stormtroopers and then being overwhelmed by a whole bunch of them and then running back the other way, but his moment with the intercom, where he's no, we're all fine here, everything's fine, don't no, everything's good, that is probably
how good is that?
Is probably my favorite scene in the entire movie because of just how it definitely sets itself apart from everything else we've seen because it's so much more casual in tone and seemingly improvised and stuff like that. But I also always remember the boring conversation anyway is the epitome of, no, Han did shoot first. Han is the guy that shoots first. Whatever Lucas ends up deciding later, that is who that character is. And in particular with that line of boring conversation anyway, I will always now think of there's a VR experience, a Star Wars VR experience in downtown Disney that I did a few years ago with Lauren Wilson and Ben Bellevue, and it's basically a 4-person thing. It's VR where you're in a space and you kind of move around and they kind of navigate you around the space in the game. And there's a sequence in there where you're supposed to do a Simon Says kind of thing, I think, and if you mess it up, enemies come in and start shooting you or whatever. And I don't remember if it was Lauren or the one random guy that was with us, but somebody was not getting the sequence right. They weren't pushing the buttons right. And so just on a whim, I tried shooting the thing, shooting the console, and the console broke and ended it and opened the door that we were trying to get to. And I said it with the line of boring conversation anyway, and loved the fact that they had built into the VR experience that if you shoot that thing, the door will open and you'll be able to progress forward. I was yes, this is
wonderful.
Perfect. This I just got my Han Solo moment, and I will never not remember that and how great that felt. Ken, you wanted to throw something in there.
To follow up on your early thing, I often myself, and as most people do, we just call it holo chess. But its proper name is Dejeric.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
Or Dejeric.
I've definitely known that at some point in time because that is not a foreign word to me. So I'm yep. I've probably forgotten a lot of Star Wars fun facts and trivia and stuff in my life because
there's a lot to
big
forget.
Old nerd.
Yeah, so.
But
people often confuse it for Sabacc, which is
the
blackjack.
That's what I was going to
version.
say.
Right.
Yeah.
Or the blackjack game rather.
Yeah.
That was created by Old Republic.
But we can of course never forget the music that that is playing in Mos Eisley's cantina, of course, jizz music,
performed by what are they, the Whalers or the Jizz Whalers or something?
No, it's who is it?
It's something font.
Something 5, right, or something? I don't remember. The weird little baldy guys. Anyway, Frank, what are some of your favorite moments in the movie?
This is kind of one of my whole. It's kind of a whole sequence, but it is one of my favorite things in the movie, and it's when they are in the Death Star and they have to hide, and then Luke and Han put on the stormtrooper outfits, and that's kind of a whole extended sequence. It's a whole part of the movie, but from beginning to end, I really love everything they do with that, because I love the way that they hide and they sweep the ship and then they come out, and then Han has that, kind of throws his voice or does whatever. He's hey, can you give us a hand with this? Mm-hmm. And then the guys go in there and they just beat him up and let her shoot them. and like take the costumes, and then even the way Han tricks the guy to open the door, where he's like, oh, we got a busted transmitter, like open the thing, and then Chewie just like beats that guy up immediately. I'm like, I love everything that they do with like them actually being like smart, you know, because they're like outnumbered and they kind of have to, and it kind of goes into what you guys were saying too about how like it's kind of a fun romp B movie where they're just wearing these like dumb costumes and going about all this stuff. So that's like one of my favorite whole like set pieces in the movie.
Yep. Logan, any other fun favorite moments you want to shout out? Well, I believe Cameron is still looking up the name of the Mos Eisley band.
No, sorry, I got into it. I mistook Sabacc for being a different game. I recognized it my own self, so I'm self-correcting myself on that one.
No, I mean, there are so many great scenes. We've already kind of touched on some, right? Like, I think the whole like sequence of them at the control panel while they're trying to like open Leia's cell is amazing. Like, I'm almost continuously surprised at how much I always love that scene and how funny I always find. Like, it always surprises me somehow how good it is. That whole sequence of like Han just being like, "Oh no, everything's all right down here. Don't worry.
How are you?
Don't worry. Don't check down." Yeah, how are you? It's like such a great thing, and like I think it just has such a good amount of like the fun, I think, and sense of humor that's in this movie. I obviously already talked about like Luke's kind of scene at the Twin Suns, which I think is just like so beautiful, and is like my favorite scene in the movie. I think that obviously we haven't even touched on it really, but like the final sequence of like them all attacking the Death Star is like obviously iconic and great in its own right. Like the multiple kind of runs the trench, like use the Force with Obi-Wan Kenobi, like giving him that advice. I think one of the things I like too about A New Hope is that, and it's the only Star Wars movie really that can do it because of the nature of what it is, but like the Force and the Jedi are such a unknown to like, in the original trilogy, that's always kind of the case. It's always kind of unknown. You're never really given that many answers. But like here, it's like, is it even real? Right? Like, what is going on? And like that final moment with Obi-Wan in the trench run is like, this is a real thing. And it's like, and you can't really explain it yet. Luke has no answer of like what he's hearing and what he's kind of experiencing. But I always enjoyed just that thing of like, here's something, right? And there's no further explanation needed. We're not going to like explain it with like a 5-minute like exposition dump. It's just like, here's this moment, the movie's going to end, and you can make what you want out of that for 3 years until the next movie comes along, right? Like, I always kind of loved how nebulous the Jedi and the Force are, and how removed it feels, how ancient it feels here. Whereas I think one of the issues I have with the prequels is that it condenses the timeline down so much to where like it doesn't really make any sense. But in the original trilogy, it's also, I think, potent and powerful and like mystical. And then I think everything that involves like Han and Chewie just like bickering back and forth is and always will be fantastic, and I will always love. I'm a sucker for the two of them. They're great together. And, you know, it's hard to have really good chemistry with someone who just growls while you speak a language. But they pull it off so well. And I think the kind of the fervent love people have for Chewbacca and where it starts here. And, I mean, Groot is nothing but a Chewbacca knockoff in the Guardian of the Galaxy movies,
Accurate.
basically. And I think, you see why that kind of template of that character works so well here.
Yeah.
So as a side note, the reason why there was confusion is because the band that we're referencing in Mos Eisley is Figrin Dawn and the Modal Nodes, or Modal Nodes. And the other one, the one that we're confusing it with, is the Max Rebo band, which plays at Jabba's palace.
Yeah, I was not. I definitely was not thinking
Jedi.
of the Max Rebo band. I just thought the Jizz band had like a specific name, and I just did not. What you said was not that. So.
Yeah, no. Also, the song is called "Mad About Me."
Yeah. So, what are some of your favorite moments, Cam?
So there is a great YouTube video. If you look it up, it's called Obi-Wan Kenobi PTSD. And it is essentially a very brilliant use of the Obi-Wan's entrance to the film, as well as like these really great intercuts with flashbacks. It's only about 5 minutes long, but I actually think it helps define those moments where he's telling the quote unquote the lie. So with these flashbacks, that kind of makes so it's like from a certain point of view, it makes it much more credible and pliable. Something I love about this film is, one, I love Obi-Wan Kenobi. That's something in the last couple times I've watched the film I've come to like really, really love and appreciate. Is he's not this kind of stuck up mentor. Like I kind of as a kid I always thought of him as like the new grown up that had to run how Luke ran his life. But as I've gotten older, and definitely the last several times I've watched the film, he's wily. He's wily. He's
mischievous.
He's mischievous for sure. He's so mischievous.
These are not the
but he's
droids
also
you're looking for.
Yeah, these aren't the, but no, more like, but it's also like when he's totally playing Han. Mm-hmm. He's playing Han for a sucker at that table. Oh, I don't know if you, like, how fast is your ship even? You know, that whole like, I don't know about like this wily negotiator that they end up that Ewan McGregor plays so incredibly well in the prequels. Like this young Obi-Wan, not this older, oh, I'm looking after Luke kind of guy, but just like this actual like very mischievous character who is, and it fulfills this idea. And it's something I recognized this last time is I paid more attention to the words that people use for Force users. Wizard, when the guy is talking to Darth Vader, your order in its sorcerous ways. This idea of like quote unquote magic. For the Force is the magic of this universe. That the prequels famously mucks up super badly.
but it's also the religion. Yeah. It's like you are the
religion,
you're the last of your religion, and hokey mumbo jumbo.
Yeah, like all of that is just done. I paid more attention to it this time around, and it really does feel that way. The way that like Obi-Wan Kenobi comes off feeling like a wily, mischievous type of wizard character who, when you're like, oh, he's fun, like he's this wonderful, fun older character, but then when he gets in the same room as Darth Vader, that fight, and I love that fight because even though the prequels established these bigger spectacle fights, even Luke and Darth Vader's later battles would have more of that spectacle. The fight between Darth Vader and Obi-Wan still to this day feels so, like, if you compare it to their duel in Revenge of the Sith, these are two men who are already masters at their craft of lightsaber dueling and wielding, but they've come so much farther since then. The articulation of movement, the way that Obi-Wan and Kenobi is easily compensating for the fact that he is older. And you play into it like the narrative of the story, but the way that they did it so well, capturing this idea of these two master swordsmen who make these small movements that have so much more spectacle behind them when the lightsabers clash. It's not about overpowering the other with moves, leaping over them. It is truly a battle between two master swordsmen. And I love that scene, and it's incredibly iconic and in total inverse of what we see with Duel of the Fates. Where these two master and apprentice versus a complete unknown and not knowing how to approach it, versus this calculated, this is master and apprentice. They know each other intimately. How much has changed over the last 20 years? And like the way they go through that process. I love that scene, but more than that, I love Obi-Wan didn't really lose his duel. He sees Luke and realizes that that's the goal. The goal is for Luke to carry forward, not for me to win this fight. So the moment he sees Luke and he realizes what he needs to do, he turns off that lightsaber. And he turns to Vader and he says, Vader, like you'll strike me down, but I will become more powerful than you can imagine. Like that phrase, that like you may kill the body, but my soul and mind live on. This idea of like it truly when the lightsaber impacts him, it doesn't even cut through his cloak. Like he has become such one with the Force that his cloak is unmarred when it drops to the ground after Vader's lightsaber's gone through it. And he's like when Vader stomps on it, he picks up the lightsaber, stomps on the cloak, like what kind of like, and it just plays into this feeling of Vader has like once again the Master has one more trick that he never taught me.
Yeah, especially because like that's not as we will later find out, that's not a thing that happens when people die.
No, so. And what's great about the prequels is they show us that it's like somebody who like the person who taught him how to do it was like his master beyond the grave who had already mastered the technique and passed it on. So like you have this like the one last thing that the Master has over the apprentice, following through with that. Like the classic tropes that we now know them as tropes and cliches, but are so timeless. And McGinnis, when he's delivering his lines, it's with such, like, he is such an incredible actor. The way that he just is able to deliver.
It's just Guinness, Alec Guinness.
Oh, what did I said? McGinnis. Didn't
you said
My
McGinnis.
apologies.
I think you're combining McGregor and McGinnis.
I did.
McGregor
My
and
bad.
McGinnis, yeah.
Which is funny because that's also Terry McGinnis's Batman from Batman Beyond.
There you go. Yeah.
I digress. Yeah. So Alec Guinness, his delivery of this very iconic character is so. He's the one that makes it iconic. He sets the stage for this character for who he'll end up becoming in the prequels, but this time around, I definitely pulled more from that. And also I pulled more from how he, despite being in Luke's life for such a, either as this wandering figure around Luke, where Luke isn't really close to him. Mm-hmm. He's the old man who lives out in the waste that, Luke knows from, just having him be in the area, versus the closeness they have, because when... And it hit me this time when Obi-Wan Kenobi is struck down by Darth Vader. When he disengages his lightsaber and takes that hit, it's Luke realizing that he has nobody left. His uncle and aunt, dead. In a horrible fashion.
I appreciate where you're going with this, because I definitely chill murder. Yeah. I felt that, but I felt it later when Biggs dies, actually, because there's a moment, because he gets and to me, to your credit, he doesn't know he's going to run into Biggs at that point or whatever, but when
because he thinks Biggs is still at the academy, the Imperial Academy, he doesn't know that Biggs is defected yet.
Yeah, so when Biggs dies during the trench run, there is a moment where Luke has to steel himself, and I was like, oh yeah, he is all alone now. There is nobody left from his life before this. Mm-hmm. It's I also love, because of course these movies have been around the block, and many versions of pop culture have kind of taken their little jabs at it and stuff. And when Ben dies at this point, or one of the things I thought about in this was I don't know if it's a Robot Chicken sketch or if it's one of the Family Guy ones, but it's the idea of Leia basically being oh, did the old guy whose name you didn't even know die? My whole planet is gone. Why should I feel bad for you, buddy? Everybody I have ever known is dead and just space dust. But sure, let's you cry about the old wizard guy that you met a day ago.
Yeah, no, the whole. It's fascinating because it just pulls into this moment of when it happens to Biggs later, this moment of that was it. That was the last connection to my past, and it weirdly reminded me of a scene from The Last Jedi when Kylo Ren tells Rey.
Last Jedi spoiler alert.
But anyway, if you haven't seen it by now, I'm sorry. Summer Star Wars, baby.
We've been spoiling stuff all over the map.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is definitely
for sure.
intended for people that already know these movies.
Yeah. When he tells Rey, like, you have to leave the past behind. Kill it if you have. The idea that you have to leave that behind. And it's weird because that's a weird lesson Luke had to learn. Which was, but then he was like in episode 2, or episode 5, he has this entire journey about like letting go of things and detaching himself. And then it's this really awesome setup for a thread through the trilogy that I didn't recognize before today. Or rather, yeah, today. I finished watching it today, and I had that realization. Like that through line of the idea of the spirituality of detaching yourself from the physical world and the physical needs that play into kind of like the Jedi philosophy. And I'm like, man, it just like there are so many layers to this story, and it always gets me every time. Whenever I watch this film, A New Hope especially, more than any of the others, man, I'm getting something great out of it every time.
Yeah.
So
a couple other things.
I will say, I'm just gonna like briefly touch on, because Cameron triggered me a little bit here with the Last Jedi reference, that I think the difference between Kylo Ren and Luke and their philosophy in letting go of the past, obviously, is that Kylo Ren is saying, kill it, and in Luke's case, it's being murdered in front of his eyes, right? Like they're very different approaches.
And then Return of the Jedi, right? And Return of the Jedi, we'll do culmination of it flipping, and going inverse, because it's his attachment, and his care to his father that saves him. So, I digress.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll get to Last Jedi and that whole podcast, and that'll get their own thing too. But like one of the things that I do find really interesting, and that like isn't a new sort of analysis of A New Hope and the original trilogy in particular, which I think is done so well in Luke's kind of journey there, is kind of his journey with his own, like the darkness within him, right? And like that's not really present here. He's very deliberately meant to be just like he's all in white. He is like the hero's journey, but like his kind of spiritual path and his like spiritual journey he'll go on between 4, 5, and 6. I've always been really interested in. We don't really get that much here. It's kind of more present in 5 and 6, but yeah, the seeds are laid.
It's like you just mentioning that makes me think of like Marty McFly doesn't care about being called a chicken in Back to the Future 1, but when they knew there was going to be another story, they kind of need to give him an arc because they realize, hey, yeah, he didn't have like a character arc in the first Back to the Future. It is George McFly's story, really. And that's kind of like there's an element of that to A New Hope where it's like, yes, of course, like he is moved around the galaxy, but it's not necessarily by his own agency so much as like he gets thrust into events, and then it's not until 5 and 6 that he really starts kind of taking ownership of those decisions more so. I just wanted to kind of maybe close us out on this kind of section with a couple other, like we've touched on them, but like of course the music throughout, like John Williams' score is iconic,
fantastic,
and pitch perfect, and it not only like you get it of course at the beginning of the movie, but yeah, really like when you get the twin sons scene that you mentioned earlier, Logan, like that's where it like kicks up to a new level. And it's like, oh, this is a movie. This is going to be an experience. This is something that like will resonate with you and is powerful. And I now have like a weird extra newfound appreciation for it after having worked for a symphony that quite often would perform John Williams' work and like Star Wars, and would play, the music, the score alongside the movie and stuff like that. Just like the realization of like how powerful and impactful that music is, and how iconic and how it stands the test of time. All of those elements. One of the things I would do, I remember I took a directing class in college, and the director or the teacher basically had us do an exercise at one point that was like focus on the sound of a project. And so go home, watch a movie with just the sound. Don't like if you can watch it, with the screen off or the monitor off and just the sound playing, like do that, or if you have to, like listen to it but be in another room or something like that and just like listen to the soundscape. I did it for Garden State, but I have since done it for Star Wars, and it's a way better experience and stuff, and just because of like how well the story is told just through the soundtrack, both the dialogue and the action. Like you don't need to see everything that's going on to still see how to know how big and bombastic this story is and how powerful it is. Yeah. And then the other thing I would be remiss, of course, is like the iconic trench run sequence at the end. Like the third act of the movie basically is phenomenal, and such a great like action set piece that again feels way cooler than some of the stuff we're going to get in future movies because of how like tangible it all feels and how like visceral and in the moment you are, and how claustrophobic being in that trench feels when like you can only have basically 3 fighters side by side, and one wrong move and boom, you're in a wall and dead. And just the different layers of that, the going in for a bombing run, but the bomber, the fact that like one of the things that jumped out at me this time that I've never really thought about is they make mention of like it's 30 fighters going up against the Death Star. Like that is basically like 30 gnats attacking you and taking you down. Because of like in size and scope and stuff like that. So it like the sheer like magnitude that it's setting up of like the real ragtagness of the rebellion here, like going in. They don't have a fleet of warships that we will later see in some of the other films. It is like all they have are 30 small fighters, X-wings and Y-wings going in, and it is like the epitome of like a guerrilla fighter kind of scenario, and trying to like overcome impossible odds in a way that's really cool. And I will also point out the same thing that director who made me do the auditory exercise pointed out to me, that it now has like stuck with me, and so now I need to like pass it on to everybody else to make them be haunted by it. The fact that like the Death Star explosion is just a sperm going into an egg is like, and then exploding into like life is just a weird little metaphor that is in there at the end of this film. A 1 in a million shot.
Trevor, that's a photon torpedo. That's not a sperm.
I mean, sure, Cameron. Let me tell you about the birds and the bees, my friend.
No, I think.
But I'm heterosexual. I don't care about birds and bees.
One of the things, giving the galaxy a new chance at life.
I think that's super cool. I love that interpretation of it.
Is the laser on the Death Star a nipple? Is that what you're saying?
I'll make.
Sorry, that just came. I had to get that out.
That I'll make for my final point is the sense of being able to follow along at the final battle too, right? Because as we go along, it's never the original trilogy just they're just better, but like part of that I think is the fact that it's very easy to keep track of both the larger plot and then also the kind of climactic fights, right? You can't get lost in them, and I think part of the issues that arise, not even with the prequels necessarily as much as the sequels, is they're so big, they're so messy, there's so much shit happening that like it becomes so easy to lose track of what is going on in these big giant climactic fights. And this
is the one where we have one plane of action almost that will grow exponentially. Over
almost
the next
insignificant.
few weeks.
But even in like Return of the Jedi, it's easy to keep track of it all, right? It's done well, and like you still have a good sense of like the scale of it all, right? Whereas by the time we get to Rise of Skywalker, I have no idea what's going on in that final fight. I mean, even in Force Awakens, they blow up the capital of the Galactic Republic, and it's like, oh, okay.
And the entire star system.
I don't have any sort of recognition. Yeah, like I have no sort of recognition of what is going on right now because the stakes aren't being set for me here, right? Like I'm not being able to be like grounded in terms of like, oh, okay, that is a big deal because of this. It just like happened. And I think in the original trilogy and in New Hope, like you very clearly see like you get this very kind of one-shot atmospheric look at Luke's face inside this cramped fighter pilot, right? And like some of the fighter pilots are very clearly almost too big for the planes they're in, and I think that adds almost a sense of like, they're being put into these things that like, if they had the resources of the Empire, they would have different planes and bigger planes, right? And they could have different things that they're having to like force themselves in to use the tools that they have. And I've always thought that was really cool. Again, tagging on to the fact of like, they're 30 guys going against the fucking galactic empire. And I feel like very really feel that in this film.
Yeah. I was going to say, and to answer, like, where is their fleet? We got the answer to that in Rogue One. Not going to spoil it, but we know what happened to it.
I mean, even without Rogue One, like, I mean, Tarkin basically says all you need to know. Retreat in our moment of triumph. I think you overestimate their chances.
For sure,
it is absolutely hubris that helps bring down the Empire there.
100%. I was going to say though that in regards to the scale and spectacle of it, especially for A New Hope here, to get it, there's only a brief snippets of lines, but it's something I caught like 5 or 6 times ago when I watched it. Is they make commentary about the pull that they're feeling on their fighters, and it's a reminder that the Death Star is so large, it has a gravitational pull. That's cool. When Porkins crashes, it's not because Porkins is a crappy pilot. It's because he can't pull out of. He can't pull out of it. That's why, one of the reasons they have to go into the trench is because you have to go along the gravitational pull of the Death Star. And being above the trench leaves you out for every single cannon to turn around and shoot you. So you instead have to go into this trench run, which makes it even more perilous, and it's so... just getting to the trench takes out most of their guys. And it's done in such a great way. And then you get Darth Vader's entrance. With his squad of guys, you see him for the first time. They've got those masks.
It has that sound effect.
Yeah, with that sound effect. And I have you now. Manipulate my advanced targeting system. Now I have you, you're done. And blowing up his friends. And it's it's so good. It's so good. And then you have the iconic cowboy scene with Han Solo coming in. It's the trench run is just iconic beyond belief.
Mm-hmm.
Now Cam's gonna make one last thing, but I also always like the fact that they don't nail it on their first run. There are 2 failed trench runs first.
Yep.
Where I think helps emphasize how difficult and nuts it is to pull it off.
Yeah, and basically that it is the last chance, because by the time it gets to Luke's run, there's nobody else left. Everybody's been taken out or Wedge is out of commission, so he's basically on the retreat, and so this is the last shot. And we've seen the targeting system didn't work. We saw that Darth Vader can really fuck things up for people, and so Luke. The combination of Han and the Force and Luke being a crack shot pilot, all makes it work in the end and gives him that extra big hero moment, of course. And so it's all building up to that moment. Everything else is the dominoes falling in place for that. Real quick, obviously there probably aren't a ton here, but we have talked a little bit about. The things we don't like about how George changed it over the years and stuff like that. So are there any, quote, least favorite moments? The one that I think of when I watch it now is knowing how many times he's changed it and all the things he's tweaked. It always is really weird to me that when Obi-Wan cuts the guy's arm off, we see the arm and then just a pool of blood on the floor. I'm just you've touched this up so many times. Why did you just never digitally remove the blood, Luke, George? What, whatever. There are a lot of those little things.
There's a union rule about it.
Knowing the number of things he's gone in and changed, and just weird things of course, the latest one was McClunky being added or whatever in the Greedo conversations.
But that's how Han knew he was going to shoot, so he had to shoot first.
Sure. But he doesn't in this version anymore. So it's you changed all these other little things so the things that like don't feel as good or work as well just always stand out like almost as much as the brontosaurus thing that Cameron was talking about earlier. Just little things like that. I'm just like, I don't like why did you not catch and correct these other, little faux pas throughout? Cam, any moments from you that you want to like point a stick at?
One. The only thing that I can think of, and the only thing that really ever jumped out at me, even as a kid, like every single time I watch it, is the weird one-off droid racism that is not addressed before, at the time, nor ever afterwards. Does it ever come up that there's racism against droids? It's just one bartender in one cantina in one spaceport on one point, like just that singular moment in time. There's racism against droids. And that's it. I mean, that has always bothered me.
I've not seen Cruella yet, but based on like the scene that everybody was sharing on Cruella, I'm guessing a droid killed that bartender's father.
He had a bad run-in with droids. So
he has banned droids from the bar. But also, like we also only ever see in this saga really like that bar. So maybe like there is. I mean, Solo introduces the idea that there's like other droid politics or something going on later,
which I love.
But yeah, like I mean, so it could have been like some of the things we do have to keep in mind. Like we only see very small glimpses into this broader universe that it falls on us to like create those other stories of like what why does that guy hate droids, especially when Mandalorian has now come along and that place is being run by a droid. So like clearly something has changed in between.
That's why that guy hates droids.
And the end
they were going to take his job.
And the end of
he lost his job to a droid. Yeah, he's pissed.
Frank, how about you?
I don't think there's a ton that I would necessarily consider my least favorite. I think I'm kind of with you where like I think some of my least favorite stuff is some of those re-edits, and it's funny because I admittedly like I haven't seen the original version. But it is still weird, like, when Han, like, lifts up over his tail, and, like, there's just these really weird things that I just wish, like, kind of just weren't there. Mm-hmm. And that's just definitely kind of my main thing that like, still, gets me even when I watch the movie now, like, to this day.
Yeah. How about you, Logan?
So I've long been, I mean, one of my most controversial Star Wars takes is that I don't give a fuck about the re-edits and special edition stuff. I've never been bothered by it. I've long been on the record saying that like I like the fact that Jabba the Hutt is a Hutt in this movie and that they fixed that and that he's not just like a random dude because that was the thing for me as a kid where I was like, why is Jabba a man and then like 4 years later in the timeline he's still become a Hutt? Like, doesn't make any sense.
Have that
in
the original release.
I've never enjoyed the fact that they do, like, people get so worked about this stuff, right? Like, does it look great at times? Of course it doesn't. But, like, I'd also rather just Jabba the Hutt be a Hutt. I'm fine. Like, another stuff is all just, like, him flexing. And so, like, I'm fine with, like, the Bronchiosaurus scene, basically. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm fine with all this dumb stuff. And, like, A New Hope doesn't have too much there's not that much that I found like egregious in it, right? Like I've never ever understood the Han shot first like fear around that whole thing. Like it's like I've never been like that fundamentally changes the character. No, it doesn't.
We don't have time for me to argue.
This is like part of the larger thing. Yeah, like this is part of the larger thing of like people hating George Lucas and me always being like, you're wrong for that opinion. Like it's like I've just like the people who are always like George Lucas murdered my childhood, and I'm always like, well, first off, if you think George Lucas murdered your childhood, it's only because he gave it to you first off. So really, you're just at a net neutral. You just had a childhood and it was fine. But second off, like, no, it's okay. Like if you don't like the special edition things, they account to like 45 seconds of this movie. Mm-hmm. It's gonna be all right. Just like skip that scene. It's fine. Like, you know, like George Lucas is George Lucas, and I think I've never had an issue with him going back in and tweaking stuff and changing stuff because like he's doing it and like he's doing it to Trevor's point, like really weird shit, and like I kind of like part of me kind of appreciates that where he's just like, hey, like here's a random thing I'm gonna do, right? And like that's the reason. Like the joke me and Trevor made, I think the last time we were talking about like J.K. Rowling and Harry Potter for like one of the video game shows is that like She's out here being like, this magic spell makes you like shit your pants, and there are no toilets, and like everyone has to like do all this stuff. And George Lucas is just like, hey, this character's name is like Rebo Badibo, and like that's way more fun to me than like J.K. like Rowling shit, and like her like trying to like retroactively like make everything better than it was in her books. And it's like George Lucas is just like, hey, like I like special effects, and I'm gonna put them in the movie. And if you don't like that, well then Jabba the Hutt's a Hutt now. Too bad. And like I'm like I can live with that. I can live with the like Greedo Han shot first thing. One of the things I will say, it's not a least favorite thing. It's actually the opposite of this question. But like in terms of like my like recurring feature for the series, which will be like I love this random character. I've always, for no reason, loved Greedo. I can't explain it, but I've always fucked with that character. I've always been like, that dude slaps. I always had his action figure. I always was a fan of him. Always been a big fan of Greedo. So he's my like new hope, like random character I love.
He's a good character. He's in it for a bit. He's a good foil.
He's a badass. Yeah. He's got a great costume.
He's
so
a unique
that
alien.
Really matters when you're like 5.
He's unique. He's
yeah.
From the moment you see him and the moment he starts talking, you can tell that guy's like he's like scummy, and it's a great character. It's well done. It's extremely well done. Greedo's just a really well done character.
You love him.
So I don't blame you for that.
You love him because he shoots first. Yeah. That's the kind of guy he is. He's the kind of guy.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's what it was this whole time.
Yeah.
He has the catchphase now.
Yeah.
McClunky.
Greedo
McClunky. McClunky. Yeah.
That's what his action figure says now when you press the back.
There you go. It really like I've never gotten like super behind like the crazy stuff. It just is like, I mean like the Han shooting first thing, and we're not going to go into a whole thing about this. So yeah, I'm going to shut you down preemptively, Cam. But
we don't need to. Yeah.
Like the argument is like, well, that's the kind of like character he is, and especially because he doesn't even stay consistent throughout the edits, because like in the next movie he will immediately try and shoot Vader without like taking pause or not being a bad guy or whatever, as George is kind of like pushed at. But another moment that just jumped out at me this time around, I think just in the like I'm growing so used to a more fast-paced kind of action, is just how long it takes Luke to get the grapple hook for him and Leia to like swing across. Like it cuts back and forth between Leia shooting at those stormtroopers and the stormtroopers shooting back, while he is just constantly like fiddling with his thing and just trying to get it out, and then he finally does, and he just kind of like throws it. It's just like, maybe you could have cut like 5 seconds out of that sequence in one of those multiple re-edits just to move us along a little bit quicker there. Like I didn't need to see him also, like completely practically pull out enough of the thread to create this grapple hook moment for you.
I will say that's a total DIY grapple hook that he had.
Yeah, I mean, like it's definitely
that's like
yeah. Which I
get.
That's the
like,
other thing is it would also
to,
be a like in a current era kind of thing. It would be a bat tech kind of thing that Batman would use or something. It'd be a bat grappling hook that you just have a gun that he could shoot and do that instead of having to like pull it out of a belt somewhere. Which it also begs the question of like did you use that on the moisture farm a lot? And I don't know, just that, like in the same way that you're talking about, like you find new things, I also find new things, and it just kind of makes me ask like new questions about the world each time a little bit of like, that's a weird thing that we're now seeing here for the first time, but whatever.
You want to know something? You want to know something really cool? My final thing will just be this little fact. If you keep an eye throughout all the films, you'll see a particular thing of note. And that's a bit of a pun because there is no paper in Star Wars.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that sounds right.
Yeah, if you watch the films, and as you're watching with us, audience, listener, and watcher of the YouTube video.
Everything's digital.
Everything's digital. Everything's digital.
We got paper watch.
Keep an eye out because you'll be like, well, how do they get through things without ever needing to write anything down? And it's very well done throughout every single one of the films, except like the sequels. The sequels don't really ever have that as an issue, but it's a little thing that George Lucas has done since A New Hope to like have a consistency that this is a futuristic world, that you don't have stuff like that, and which is just absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
So
okay. So let us dive into our report card, and we'll eventually, as kind of Logan alluded to, I think we will eventually try and like come up with some kind of ranking that I'm sure will be terrible because there's 4 of us, so I'm sure we're going to have like even votes and splits and stuff like that. Maybe we'll have to pull out the RNGesus dice that we used back when we ranked all of the
just flip a coin,
all of the PS4 games of the generation.
This is how Rise of Skywalker becomes number 1.
Exactly, yeah.
This is the thing. It's like there's no guarantee about where anything will lie because Frank saw the prequels first.
There you go. So let us dive in and give our grades of Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope, from A+ to F. Logan, what do you want to give A New Hope?
I'll give it an A. Right, I think on Letterboxd I gave it like 4 to 5 stars. I mean, like, yeah, it's great, or 4.5, something like that, probably. Yeah, it's rad. It's great. I think, like Cameron said, and like you and Frank have kind of attested to, I think it's just a remarkably well-made film on almost every single level. The fact that the movie even exists is in itself a massive achievement. The fact that it is like watchable is another one, and the fact that it ended up being a supremely well-crafted, well-directed, well-acted, just utterly fun movie is almost unbelievable. Yeah, it's a blast. It is like basically the template every movie that is any sort of popcorn blockbuster film has been based off of in the last 40 plus years. It's absolutely fantastic.
Yep. Cameron.
A+, enough said.
Okay. Frank.
Yeah.
I would go A as well. This is definitely just like a great movie, and I think we've kind of already talked about all the reasons why, but this is still just definitely a great movie. If anything, I liked it even more this time, which, like, I know I've seen it multiple times, never disliked it, but I really just had a great fun time this time. And this is definitely, like, I think we've said this a couple times, but this is definitely one I think I might just go put on in the future and just watch and just run through, even if it's just in the background. Like, I definitely feel like I have a little bit more of like, if you just need a good fun time, just throw this on and let it roll, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think yeah, go ahead.
I will say, not that I didn't really mean to interrupt, but I was just going to say that, like, I will say, I find it really funny that we're gonna set this series really high, and then we're gonna just kind of, after episode 6, it's gonna be a roller coaster in terms of like reactions and opinions and thoughts, and like that's where it's gonna get really interesting.
Yeah, I also am in the A camp, especially knowing kind of where this ultimately falls in my ranking and hierarchy of Star Wars. I definitely want to leave some room for some proper A pluses and stuff like that. But it's still, it started it all and gave us an incredible standout film. So yeah, it's well, it doesn't like hit every note that I wanted to hit or everything like that. It's still phenomenal, and it's absolutely an A. So one of the things I want, as I think we'll do this kind of as we go, we'll kind of have like the That Nerdy Site ranking of the series, as well as like our own personal. So we can think about that as we go each time, and whether that's reflected in the grades or not, I don't really care. If you end up like ultimately saying like, oh, another movie is worse than this, but it ends up getting a higher grade or blah blah blah, like whatever. This is all just dumb fun anyway. So don't like go nuts trying to be like, okay, well I have to give this a C- because I'm going to give this other one a C. Just be fun with it. But yeah. It's okay. Extra credit. Any other suggestions if you like this? So conveniently, there are 9 movies in the Skywalker saga, which would mean whatever movie we're having would theoretically just have all other 8 movies. But this is not the case. The extra suggestions that you get on this one are The Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, The Rise of Skywalker, The Mandalorian, The Phantom Menace, and Attack of the Clones. So The Mandalorian beats out Revenge of the Sith to keep it from being a Skywalker saga
direct.
Clean sweep. I will be very curious. I've not looked ahead or anything like that, but I will be very curious if any of these movies are just recommending the core saga, or if they all have like some outlier that's playing a role in there. Because honestly, like, it's weird because I would of those, I would put Rogue One ahead, as more recommended viewing over Mandalorian. But so be it. Extracurriculars. Anybody else watching anything else on Disney Plus? That's a no from Logan, no from Frank. Cam, anything from you?
I've been watching Bad Batch.
Bad Batch?
Star Wars.
Nice.
Star Wars: The Bad Batch.
Cool.
Oh, right.
Great.
I'm continuing to keep up with that. I finished the Mighty Ducks Game Changers, which we talked about a little bit on this last week's That Nerdy Site show. I've watched a few more episodes of DuckTales, and I'm continuing to watch the new episodes of High School Musical, the musical, the series, Volume 2, because it's a dumb, fun show, and I have a good time listening to them kids sing about the now Beauty and the Beast, as well as still some High School Musical stuff, because, of course. Lots of fun stuff there over on Disney Plus as well. I'm also I watched the Bo Burnham thing Inside today, which is on Netflix. But who that was? No, God,
I was going to say that on Disney Plus.
That was a whole other vibe that I'm sure we'll talk about.
I was about to say, I was like, I understand why you're mentioning it, because you need to tell somebody that you've seen it because you had an existential crisis.
Yeah. I will talk about it more on this week's That Nerdy Site show, I'm sure. But yeah, that is going to do it for this episode of That D Plus show, the beginning, the kickoff of our summer of Star Wars. Thank you to everybody for joining me to talk about Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. You can follow Cameron at RevCavett. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Cam?
I want to give a massive shout out to our YouTube page. It has been having a lot of, we've been putting out a lot of fun content there. If you're watching this video on our YouTube page, youtube.com/thatnerdysite. Just really want to heavily double down on it by saying we're going to be continuing to put out new content, and I hope you will enjoy it. And if you haven't seen it yet, go back, watch my Emily's Way 3 Let's Play. You can watch It Takes Two with Logan and Trevor. There's a lot of really great content there that's there now and will be coming out in the future. So keep an eye out.
Cool. You can follow Frank at Irrelevant Jokes. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Frank?
Not too much from my side, but I'm definitely glad to be back and making some more content. So hopefully I'll have some more to shout out in the next couple episodes as we keep doing the summer of Star Wars.
Great. You can follow Logan at Lefty Logie. Anything you want to give some love to, Logan?
Yeah, I'll shout out the YouTube page as well. A lot of good content there, like Cam said. His Emily's Way 3 Let's Play. Myself and Trevor went through It Takes Two. The one particular shout out I'm going to give, though, is going to be for me and Trevor's Let's Play of Operation Tango. I had a ton of fun with it. I've been thinking about it since we actually last played it, Trev. The game's real fun. It's really neat. It seems like it's going to be a pretty simple platinum for me and Trevor as well. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. I'm excited to kind of play through more of that, and I would expect more Let's Plays of that rolling out in the coming weeks as well.
Hopefully, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey on Twitter, and I will echo all of that, the YouTube love, but I also want to give a shout out to what will be next week's episode of That News You Care About, because it's going to be our fun, big E3 predictions show, because E3 is, of course, nearly upon us. So that'll be a fun one. And then I don't know, we haven't really discussed as a team if we're going to be doing any kind of reactions to E3 thoughts and stuff like that, but I'm sure we will have some kind of thoughts about E3 in some form or other on one of our shows. Be it a live reaction or a recorded video reaction or something like that. I know some of the things are going to our day jobs are going to impact a lot of that, but the Bethesda and Xbox conference at least is on a Sunday, and looks like some of the other shows are that Saturday and stuff. So we might be able to get some of that stuff together. So keep an eye out for all of that upcoming E3 coverage from us. You can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site and see all the stuff over there at thatnerdysite.com, or as has been mentioned, youtube.com/thatnerdysite. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please rate, review, like, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, ring any bells that you might see on YouTube, because they help algorithms, and they help kind of give us some traction. We had a nice little flurry there where we were getting like a healthy dose of influx of subscribers, and then just get like immediately just plateaued. Like we've been at 302, I think, for like a month now or something like that. So if you don't already subscribe to us, consider that, because it helps get us in front of other people's eyes and stuff like that. And if you do feel so inclined, you can always help supporting us financially to help kind of pay the bills for the podcast feeds by going to patreon.com/thatnerdysite and supporting us over there. Thank you for joining us. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, and class dismissed.